Let's take a look at all the buttons, knobs, dials, and flaps on the D3400. We're going to start on the front of the camera itself, where there's only one button, which we already looked at in the setup guide, which is the lens release button. So you press and hold this button down to take your lens off and to put it back on again. Now, on the side of the lens itself, if you have the kit lens, is also a button. This is the lens lock, and you have to press and hold this button while rotating the lens to unlock the lens to be able to use it, and then press and hold and rotate again in order to lock the lens for safe travels. On the top of the camera, we have the mode dial, which allows you to choose which mode the camera is shooting in. And then, of course, we have the power switch, which is a toggle switch, and it surrounds the shutter button itself, which allows you to both focus and, of course, take your photos. And then we have the info button, which activates the info screen on the back of the camera, bringing up this display for you. Then we have the record button, which starts recording a video right from whatever mode you happen to be in. And finally, we have the dual function exposure compensation / aperture button. So with this button, you can change the aperture when in manual mode, or when shooting in a priority mode, this button allows you to change the exposure compensation. Over here on the side of the camera, we have two buttons. The function button, which is actually customizable, and by default, it is set to change your ISO when shooting in manual mode. And I recommend you leave it set to that. But if you want to change it, I show you how in this video right here. The other button is for popping up the flash if you want to use it. And then we move on to the back of the camera. So down the side, we have the play review button, which allows you to see any photos you might have taken with the camera. We have the menu button, which takes you into the camera's menu system. And this magnification button is for zooming in on an image when you are in review mode. The button below is for zooming out of your images when you are looking at an image in the review mode. And if you go far enough, it'll actually zoom out to give you like a global view of all the images on your memory card. But this button also has a secondary function. Do you see that little question mark that's just to the side of it? That's for when you're in the menu mode of the camera. So if you go into the menu and you press this button here, it actually gives you information about the particular option or item that you currently have highlighted in the menu. And then finally, we have this button down here. Now, this I button activates your info menu on the back of the camera and allows you to navigate through these options and change these different options on the back of the camera. This is sometimes called the quick menu as well. And then on the other side, we have the AEL, AFL button. This button serves a couple of different purposes. First of all, when in the priority modes, you can set this button to either lock your exposure so that when you move the camera, the exposure doesn't change as the camera reevaluates the scene. You can also set it to lock focus so that when you move the camera, the focus doesn't change even if you're not holding the button down. And you can customize this button for a totally different function if you choose so. Then we have the control dial, which allows you to change different functions of the camera depending upon what you're doing. We have the live view button, which puts the camera into live view mode and brings the image up on the back of the camera itself. And then, of course, we have the directional pad with the OK or confirmation button in the middle. We have the trash button for deleting images on your camera. And we have this button here for changing your shooting mode if you want to go from single shot to burst mode or timer mode. Finally, on the left side of the camera, we have this flap, and underneath the flap, we have a port for your remote if you want to plug in a wired remote or use something like a wired intervalometer. And below that, an HDMI port. And this is not a full-size HDMI, it's a mini HDMI port. And this allows you to connect your camera to a monitor or to a TV to show images or see the control screen or other things like that. On the right side of the camera, of course, we have the SD card slot that you can open and close to change the SD card. And finally, on the bottom, we have the battery door. And those are all of the buttons on the Nikon D3400. If you have any questions about this camera, check the playlist. Otherwise, let me know in the comments if I haven't answered it already. And in the next video, I'm going to show you how to use this camera while shooting in manual mode and how to change all the most important manual mode functions.